were willfully blind, or, maybe you weren't protecting your men. Maybe you were going for the promotion because you're more ambitious than you should be. Like that speaks to intent. But you shouldn't convict yourself until all the arguments that are in favor of your innocence have exhausted themselves, right? And that is the way that our legal system is set up. And there's a good reason for that too. And then knowing also that atonement is possible and forgiveness appropriate when you've learned your lesson, and that's also very useful when you're disciplining children. So, for example, when my kids were young and I used to have them sit on the steps when they were, acting like barbarians, I should clarify that. You discipline your children when they're acting in a way that isn't appropriate for their age in accordance with universal human judgment. So you should discipline your children when they're disgracing themselves. And the reason you should do that isn't because they're bad kids, or because it reflects badly on you, or because you're angry, but because if they continue to act that way, other people aren't going to want to have them around. And that's not good for your kids, so you discipline them. So I say to my son, for example, go sit on the steps till you can act like a civilized human being, or whatever terminology is appropriate when he's young. And the rule was, well, as soon as you get yourself under control, problem solved. Well, it's the same with past sins, so to speak, as if you failed to hit the target properly, but you figured out why, and now you know how you would chart your course differently in the future, done. And it's also the case that even most negative emotion that you experience in relationship to past memories only emerges because there's a hole in your adaptive structure. So imagine at some point in the past you fell in a pit and you don't know how you got there. Well, that emotion is going to remain hot and dangerous until you figure out why you fell in. And the reason that your conscience keeps torturing you about that is because, well, you fell into a hole and you don't know why, and so maybe you'll fall into another one, and so you shouldn't be that comfortable. But if you can figure out why, and you can reevaluate your aim or your course so that that isn't going to happen in the future, well, even psychologically, your own conscience will let you off the hook if you've reconfigured your pathway. And you do that, well, partly by not taking yourself apart to any great degree. All right, so you said that one of the things that you said there were two reasons you thought that people were maybe coming to see you live, is they'd been watching your podcast and they actually wanted to make more personal contact. Do you do meet and greets and that sort of thing at the end of the?
I do it the whole time. Like, as soon as people start coming in, I just hang out with them and then get up on stage and do the show and then hang out. And the staff at the place will say, "How long are you going to meet with people?" And I say, "Until everyone's met with me that wants to meet."
Yeah, and do you do that? Do you do that formally, or do you do that informally?
Informally.
Yep. See, at the end of my lectures, we have a formal meet and greet, and people line up, and there's a bunch of reasons for doing that. There's a ticket increment that's associated with that. So there's a financial reason, and that makes the tour more rewarding. But it's also because there's so many people that want to do that, formalizing it made it much more efficient, because everybody gets, it's not very much time. It's only about 15 seconds, probably something like that. But the parameters are pretty nicely defined, and we can, what would we say? We can provide more people with what they want doing that. And so I really enjoy that, actually. And 15 seconds isn't very long, but it's not nothing. And if you're awake, you can have a bit of an interaction with someone that isn't only surface. And that's also a really interesting challenge, to be able to do that rapidly and efficiently in a way that's satisfying for everybody who's involved.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is people come up to me and they say, "I feel like I know you."
Yeah, right.
And I say, "You do."
Yeah.
Like, you listen to the podcast, there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of me talking about all this different stuff. And if you listen to all that, you do know.
Yeah, right.
And then I kind of know you too, because we've had these shared experiences of going through all these topics together. And so I kind of know you too.
Yeah.
And so you do have like a legitimate connection with people, and they can come up and just tell you whatever it is they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
and they can ask me a question in 14 seconds and
Yeah.
I'll give them an answer in 32 seconds and we're good. And they're high-fiving and bro hug and we're moving on. So
well, that's a
pretty
lot
awesome
of contextual information.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
You know, and like you said, the idea that the people who are coming have that they know you, that's not a falsehood. Unless you're being false in your podcast, and I know that you're not false in your podcast, so they actually do know you. Yeah, I really enjoy going. I really enjoy going tour. How long do you talk?
2.5 hours, something like that.
Oh yeah. So quite a while.
Yep.
Okay,
And I'll do some Q&A in there as well.
There'll be some Q&A.
Roll the dice with the Q&A. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, we
Let's
use
go.
Slido.
I don't use that.
Well, it's this technology so everybody on the screens in the theaters, there's a code, and everybody can enter the code into their phone, and it brings them to the Slido site, and then they can ask a question, but more importantly, they can upvote the questions. And so that's very helpful because I talk for 90 minutes, about hour, 90 minutes, something like that, and then Tammy aggregates the questions from Slido, and she asks me the questions, and because everybody can vote, it gives us a chance to sample the audience, and it's a good way of organizing it as well, too, because the problem with taking live questions is that people don't know how to handle the mic, and so no one can hear them, and then the audience starts talking, and then you get people who are just grandstanding or don't really have a question, and Slido has worked extremely well for us for handling that.
I guess the only thing can you then call that person out and have them come up and have them
you could, but
expand on it?
Well, you could. I haven't done that. That's not a bad idea.
Because
we haven't done that.
Sometimes when you don't get the context around the question, you need more context to
definitely.
give a good answer.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you can't do that.
Yeah, well, you can solve that problem to some degree by selecting questions in the list of questions that don't require the additional context. And I guess I solve that sometimes too by providing, what might be a more generally applicable answer than something that would be specific to the person.
There's something kind of awesome though about just someone stepping up to the mic and you don't know what you're going to get.
Fair enough.
And I enjoy that. It's like the no net tightrope walking, right?
Well, that's also what I like about the lectures, because I don't lecture from notes. I mean, I prepare beforehand and I have a question or two in mind that I'm trying to answer, but I never use notes. And I think part of the reason that the live lectures are compelling to people is because they are without a net. They are tightrope situations. And one of the things I really like about speaking spontaneously like that is if there's a question at hand or two questions, they're questions that I seriously want to investigate. And so I'm trying to investigate them in a new way as I go. And if you do it right, you can bring the whole thing to a conclusion that's like a punchline, right? And that's really fun to see if you can orchestrate that in real time. That works on podcasts too. And
what's your batting average on getting, if you did 100 shows, how many times do you land like right where you wanted to land and you walk off the stage triumphant with a grand slam in the 9th inning?
We're experiencing a lot of global instability as we plunge into primary season. How are you protecting your family in the midst of...
Well, I would say, especially because I'm healthier again, I think I was less consistent when I was touring in 2018. Because I'll put a lot of balls in the air, and it's like you're going to see a complex movie, now and then you go to a movie and there's 50 things going on, and it's like an hour and a half in, and you think, is he going to manage it? Is he going to tie it all together? And sometimes it's like it comes together and it's like, Dad, that was a great movie. And sometimes there's some fool thing that happens and leaves everything hanging. In 2018, more frequently, I would get a lot of things going and then maybe only tie them 3/4 together. But in the last couple of years, the talks, they almost always cohere. I mean, sometimes you nail it, right? And so those are particularly exciting times, but batting average is pretty high now.
So you and I were talking about being rock stars, both of us probably would have been much better off if we'd been rock and roll stars. So what I do at my talks is I make a set list, right? Like, the old days when I would go to shows, to rock and roll shows, they
Yeah.
make a set list. And if you could steal that thing or get a hold of it at the end of the concert, you had something pretty cool, right? This set list thing. So that's what I do. I make a set list. I'll just have like different topics that I'm going to talk about,
Yeah.
and there'll be some kind of thread, but if you plan it out too much, it doesn't have